I never imagined that the deepest wound of my life would come from my own daughter's mouth. Especially on that night, when all I wanted was to celebrate beside her on her 30th birthday. I sat quietly in the back of the ballroom, surrounded by rose gold balloons, delicate floral arrangements, and soft music, watching every detail with a heart full of pride. Then she stepped onto the stage with the microphone in her hands to give her speech. I expected to hear at least a word of gratitude, but what came next shattered me. She smiled, turned to her mother-in-law, and in front of everyone declared, "This is the only mother who truly matters in my life." Then she embraced her as if I didn't even exist. And as if that wasn't cruel enough, she looked directly at me with a cold, distant stare, and added, "You can leave now." In that instant, I felt a suffocating knot form in my throat. My hands trembled on my purse as I fought to hold back tears and gather what little dignity I had left. It all started months earlier when my daughter Jessica announced she was throwing a grand party to celebrate her 30th birthday. She had married Brandon just 2 years ago, the only son of Victoria, a woman of wealth and influence in our Portland community. From the beginning, I noticed how Jessica was enchanted by her mother-in-law's lifestyle. The designer clothes, the sophisticated dinners, the international trips. It was a world completely different from ours, simple and working class. "Mom, I need your help with the guest list," Jessica said when she visited me at home one Sunday afternoon. I was happy to be able to participate in the preparations, feeling useful and connected to my daughter. So I agreed immediately. "Of course, honey. I'll think about family members and longtime friends." Jessica nodded absently while typing on her phone. "Victoria is already handling the decorations and catering. She knows the best professionals in the city." I felt a tightness in my chest hearing that. It was as if my participation was already being diminished before it even began. But I took a deep breath and smiled, telling myself it was just a party, and what mattered was Jessica's happiness. In the weeks that followed, I was gradually excluded from decisions. My suggestions were politely ignored or replaced by Victoria's more refined ideas. Jessica stopped consulting me, and our conversations about the party became increasingly rare. One day I received a message from Jessica with the formal party invitation. Digital, elegant, with details printed in gold on a deep blue background. My name was there, among the regular guests. There was no special mention of the birthday girl's mother. That hurt, but I still tried to understand. "It's just formalities," I told myself. On the day of the party, I wore my best, a navy blue dress, purchased especially for the occasion. I spent hours getting ready, wanting to look beautiful for my daughter. I arrived early at the venue, eager to help with last-minute preparations. "Don't worry, Dorothy," Victoria said when she saw me arriving. She wore a stunning red dress and jewelry that sparkled under the ballroom lights. "Everything is under control. Jessica is getting ready in the VIP room. Would you like me to take you there?" "Yes, please," I replied, feeling out of place in the luxurious environment Victoria had created. When I entered the room where Jessica was preparing, she was surrounded by friends and a professional makeup artist. She barely had time to greet me. "Hi, Mom. Good that you made it," she said quickly before returning her attention to the mirror. "Can you sit over there and wait a bit? We're almost done." I sat in the corner of the room, watching my daughter. She looked stunning in a gold dress that enhanced her beauty. But there was something different about her. It wasn't just the makeup or hairstyle. It was as if she had transformed into someone else, someone I barely recognized. When gifts began arriving, Jessica left to receive them. I was forgotten in the VIP room until one of the organizers found me and gently suggested I go to the main ballroom. I walked alone among the elegantly decorated tables. There was a place reserved for me, but not at the head table where Jessica, Brandon, Victoria, and her husband sat. The party proceeded like a gala event: live music, waiters serving champagne in crystal glasses, photographers capturing every moment. Jessica shone like a star, circulating among guests, always with Victoria by her side. Then came the time for speeches. First Brandon spoke. Emotional, declaring his love for his wife. Next was Jessica's father, my ex-husband, who gave a brief formal speech. Then, to my surprise, Victoria stood up. Jessica, my dear, she began with a choked voice. Since you joined our family, I felt as if I had gained the daughter I always dreamed of having. You brought light into our lives, and watching you flourish fills me with pride. I consider myself blessed to have you as my daughter. The guests applauded enthusiastically as Victoria and Jessica embraced emotionally. I felt my heart tighten. Those were the words I would have liked to say. That was the embrace I should have received. I waited for my turn to speak, to express my love for my daughter, but the moment never came. Instead, Jessica took the microphone, visibly moved after Victoria's speech. That's when it happened. She looked at the room, and when her eyes met mine, something changed in her expression. It was as if a curtain fell, revealing feelings I had never noticed before. I want to thank everyone for being here today, she began, but especially the person who has been my true mother in recent years. She turned to Victoria and hugged her again. This is the only mother who truly matters in my life. The entire room applauded, ignoring the weight of those words, or perhaps perceiving it perfectly. I was paralyzed, unable to process what I had just heard. Then Jessica looked directly at me. Her gaze held no regret or guilt, only contempt. You can leave now, she said, her voice amplified by the microphone. A momentary silence took over the room, followed by muffled murmurs. Some people looked in my direction, others looked away in embarrassment. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on me, judging, pitying, some even delighting in my public humiliation. I stood with trembling legs, trying to maintain dignity. Tears threatened to fall, but I refused to give Jessica that pleasure. I walked slowly toward the exit, feeling each step like an eternity. When I was almost at the door, I heard a chair scraping forcefully. A firm, clear voice cut through the uncomfortable murmur of the room. Wait! I turned and saw Emily, Jessica's sister-in-law, standing with her face flushed with indignation. Brandon's brother's wife, who had always seemed so shy and reserved, now advanced toward the center of the room with determined steps. This isn't right, she said, taking the microphone from Jessica's hands. I can't stay silent in the face of this injustice. The first part of my life had just collapsed, but something unexpected was about to begin. Emily stood, trembling but determined, holding the microphone like a weapon. Everyone in the room stared at her, surprised by this unexpected interruption. Jessica, stunned, tried to regain control of the situation. Emily, please, this isn't the time, she said, reaching out to take the microphone back. But Emily stepped back, keeping the microphone firm in her hands. If not now, when, Jessica? When are you going to stop pretending to be someone you're not? I froze halfway to the exit, unable to continue or return. Part of me wanted to flee that place, hide from the humiliation I had just suffered. Another part, however, wanted to hear what Emily had to say. All of you are applauding and smiling, Emily continued, looking at the guests, while watching a woman renounce her own mother. The woman who gave birth to her, who raised her alone after her father abandoned them, who worked 2 jobs to pay for her education. She pointed at me. That lady there, Dorothy, is the one who should be celebrated today. I saw Jessica's face go pale. Victoria, beside her, maintained an impassive expression, but her eyes betrayed her contained fury. You don't know what you're talking about, Jessica hissed, trying to snatch the microphone from Emily's hands. This is between me and her. No, it's not, Emily responded, stepping away. The moment you decided to humiliate her publicly, you made this everyone's business. Did you know your mother sold the only keepsake she had from your grandmother, a gold brooch, to pay for your graduation trip? Did you know she went nights without sleep when you were sick, that she gave up relationships because men said you were too much baggage? Emily's words hit Jessica like darts. I had never told anyone these stories except Emily. One afternoon when we talked in the kitchen while preparing Christmas dinner 2 years ago, I never imagined she would remember or use this information to defend me. Enough, Jessica shouted, her face red with anger and shame. You're ruining my party. You ruined your own party when you decided to treat your mother like trash. Emily shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. And you know why? Because she doesn't have the money or status that Victoria has. Because she represents everything you want to forget. Your simple origins, the neighborhood where you grew up, the difficulties you faced. The room was in absolute silence. No one dared move or speak. It was as if time had frozen in that moment of confrontation. Dorothy doesn't need your charity, Emily continued, looking directly at Jessica. She is stronger and more dignified than you'll ever be. But she deserves respect, and if you can't give that to her, then you're the one who should leave. At that moment, I felt a hand touch my arm. It was Michael, Brandon's older brother and Emily's husband. He smiled at me, a kind smile that gave me strength. Come on, Dorothy, he said softly. You don't need to go through this. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay and confront Jessica, to say everything that had been stuck in my throat for years. But another part, perhaps the wiser one, knew that wasn't the time or place. Thank you, I murmured to Michael, allowing him to guide me out of the ballroom. As we walked away, I could still hear Emily concluding her speech. Those who despise their roots are condemned to live without identity. I hope you understand that someday, Jessica, before it's too late. Michael took me to the parking lot. The cool night air hit me like a slap, bringing me back to reality. Only then did I realize I was trembling, not from cold but from contained emotion. I'm ashamed of Jessica's behavior, Michael said, opening the car door for me. Emily and I had been noticing how she treated you, but we never imagined it would reach this point. It's not your fault, I replied, my voice hoarse. Jessica has always been complicated. Since adolescence, she was never satisfied with what we had. She always wanted more, always looked at what others possessed. Michael nodded understandingly. Victoria didn't help. She manipulated Jessica from the beginning, feeding that materialistic side of her, making her feel special for having risen socially. We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Then Michael spoke again. Emily and I would like you to come stay with us for a few days. It's not good for you to be alone now. The offer surprised me. I knew Michael and Emily only from family gatherings. I had always found them kind, but we had never established a close relationship. That's very kind of you, but I don't want to impose. It's no imposition at all, Michael insisted. We have a comfortable guest room and the kids would love to have Grandma Dorothy around. Please, at least consider it. At that moment, the idea of returning to my empty house, with all the photos of Jessica on the walls, seemed unbearable. I accepted the offer with a nod. During the drive to their house, I stared out the window, watching the city lights pass like blurs. My mind replayed the night's events, trying to understand how my relationship with Jessica had reached that point. When she was little, we were so close. I was her world and she was mine. When did that change? When did I become a burden, an embarrassment to her? Michael and Emily's house was cozy, decorated with simplicity and good taste. Their children Noah and Emma were already asleep, but the babysitter was still awake. After Michael dismissed her, Emily appeared, still dressed for the party. Are you okay? She asked, sitting beside me on the couch. I think I'm still in shock, I replied honestly. I never imagined Jessica could, that she was capable of. The words died in my throat, replaced by a sob I couldn't contain. Emily hugged me, allowing me to finally release the tears I had held during the entire night. I cried as I hadn't cried in years, letting all the pain, humiliation, and loss overflow. I'm so sorry, Emily said, when I finally calmed down. I know my words don't fix anything, but I needed to do something. I couldn't stand by watching that injustice. You were very brave, I replied, wiping my tears. I wouldn't have had the courage to say all that. Emily smiled sadly. Victoria and Jessica won't forgive me anytime soon. I probably just became persona non grata in the family. I'm sorry I caused that. You didn't cause anything, Emily stated firmly. It was their choice, not yours. And if I have to choose between pleasing people like them or defending what's right, I prefer the second option. That night, lying in the guest room bed, I reflected on how life comes full circle. I had lost my daughter, or perhaps I had lost her long ago, without realizing it. But I had also discovered allies where I least expected them. Perhaps it was the beginning of a new phase of my life. A phase where I wouldn't be defined only as Jessica's mother. Before falling asleep, I made a decision. I would no longer beg for my daughter's love or attention. I wouldn't crawl anymore for crumbs of affection. From that moment on, I would live for myself, with the dignity that Emily had reminded me I possessed. If Jessica ever wanted to return to my life, it would have to be on my terms. With that thought, I fell asleep exhausted but somehow lighter than I had felt in years. The morning after Jessica's birthday disaster, I woke up disoriented, not recognizing the ceiling above my head. It took me a few seconds to remember I was at Michael and Emily's house, and a few more to recall why I was there. When the memory of the previous night's events hit me, I felt such a heavy weight on my chest I could barely breathe. I got up slowly, feeling every muscle in my body protest. It was as if I had aged 10 years in a single night. Looking at myself in the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Swollen eyes, deeper expression lines, an empty look that spoke of pain beyond words. There was children's laughter coming from the kitchen. Noah and Emma, Michael and Emily's children, were having breakfast. I tried to compose a less devastated expression before joining them. "Good morning, Grandma Dorothy," exclaimed 5-year-old Emma. As soon as she saw me, she ran to hug me, wrapping her little arms around my legs. The simple, affectionate gesture almost made me cry again. "Emma, remember what we talked about?" Emily said gently. "Dorothy isn't your grandmother. She's Aunt Jessica's mother. But she can be my grandma too, can't she?" The girl insisted, looking at me with big hopeful eyes. I crouched to her level. "I would love to be your heart grandma, Emma, if you want." The smile that lit up the girl's face was like a ray of sunshine amid the storm I was living through. She hugged me again, this time with even more enthusiasm. Emily served me a cup of coffee. "How are you feeling?" "Honestly, like I've been hit by a truck," I replied, trying to smile. "But I'll survive. I always have." Emily's phone rang. She looked at the screen and frowned. "It's Brandon," she said, showing me the device. "Answer it," I encouraged. "Don't worry about me." Emily hesitated before answering, and left the kitchen to speak privately. When she returned a few minutes later, her face was tense. "Jessica is furious," she reported, sitting at the table. "Brandon said she spent the entire night crying and screaming, saying I ruined her birthday." "I'm sorry about that," I murmured, feeling guilty about the conflict I had caused between them. "Don't apologize," Emily responded firmly. "Jessica is the one who should be apologizing. And by the way, Brandon agreed with me." That surprised me. "Brandon?" Emily nodded. "He said he was shocked by Jessica's attitude, that he had never seen her act that way before. Apparently, they had a serious argument after everyone left." The news gave me a bittersweet feeling. On one hand, it was comforting to know at least someone close to Jessica recognized her mistake. On the other, I hated thinking I was causing problems in my daughter's marriage. "Oh, and there's one more thing," Emily continued, hesitant. "Victoria is spreading a different version of the story. She's saying you were drunk at the party and made a scene, and that Jessica only asked you to leave because you were causing embarrassment." Indignation hit me like a wave. "That's absurd. I didn't even drink alcohol last night." "I know," Emily said, touching my hand in solidarity. "And anyone who was there knows the truth. But Victoria has many contacts and is doing everything possible to control the damage. Her and Jessica's reputation, of course." In the days that followed, I learned that Victoria's version was gaining traction in certain social circles. People who weren't even at the party repeated the story of the drunk, inconvenient mother. That hurt. But I refused to enter that game of intrigue and gossip. I held my head high and continued my life. A week after the incident, I returned to my house. Michael and Emily insisted I stay longer, but I needed to face my reality, however painful. Besides, I had to return to work at the small bookstore, where I had been manager for 15 years. On my first day back, I was met with curious looks and poorly disguised whispers. Evidently the story had spread. Maria, my assistant and longtime friend, pulled me into the storage room as soon as I arrived. "Dorothy, everyone is talking about what happened at Jessica's birthday," she said with concern in her eyes. "Is it true she kicked you out of the party?" I nodded, feeling the familiar knot form in my throat. "Yes, it's true." Maria hugged me tightly. "How absurd! How could she do that to you after everything you sacrificed for her?" "I don't know, Maria. I've been thinking about it day and night, trying to understand where I went wrong, what I could have done differently." "No, Dorothy, stop that," Maria interrupted firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. She made a terrible choice. Don't blame yourself for her behavior." I smiled, grateful for the support, but deep down the guilt continued eating away at me. Maybe if I had been a different mother, if I had managed to offer more material comfort, if I had remarried to give her a complete family. 3 days after my return to work, I received an unexpected visit at the bookstore. Victoria entered as if she owned the place, impeccably dressed and made up as always. Customers looked admiringly at that elegant woman, who seemed out of place in our small neighborhood bookstore. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. In private, I led her to the small office in the back of the store, feeling my heart race. What could she want with me? "I'll get straight to the point," Victoria began, as soon as I closed the door. "You need to stop this." "Stop what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "This victim role. These stories you're spreading about how Jessica humiliated you. It's hurting her image and, by extension, my son's." I was speechless at that woman's audacity. "I'm not spreading any stories. In fact, you're the one inventing that I was drunk." Victoria dismissed my indignation with an impatient gesture. "Look, Dorothy, we both know you were never the mother Jessica needed. You always limited her, always made her feel guilty for wanting more from life. I just gave her what you couldn't: perspective, connections, refinement." Each word was like a knife stabbing my chest. But I stood firm. "You know nothing about my relationship with my daughter. You have no idea of the sacrifices I made for her." "Sacrifices?" Victoria mocked. "Please. You raised her to be mediocre like you. If it weren't for me, she'd still be stuck in this insignificant little world, working somewhere like this." She looked around with disdain. I felt anger growing inside me, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. I wouldn't give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "If you've said what you came to say, I ask that you leave. I have a bookstore to run." Victoria smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I just came to offer a deal. Jessica and Brandon are thinking about moving abroad. He received a job offer in London, and they'll probably accept it. If you really love your daughter, let her move forward without the weight of your presence." "You're asking me to disappear from my own daughter's life?" I asked, incredulous. "I'm asking you to do what's best for her for the first time in your life," Victoria responded coldly. "Think about it." With those words she left, leaving behind expensive perfume and a trail of emotional destruction. I collapsed in the chair, trembling with anger and pain. How dare that woman judge my mother's love? How dare she ask me to give up my daughter? That night, I couldn't sleep. Victoria's words echoed in my mind, mixed with memories of Jessica as a child, teenager, adult. I remembered every moment I gave up something for her, every time I put her needs above mine. By morning I made a decision. I wouldn't disappear as Victoria wanted, but I also wouldn't drag myself, begging for my daughter's love. It was time to value myself, to rebuild my life on new foundations. Jessica had made her choice, and I needed to respect that. However painful, I picked up the phone and called Emily. "You were right," I said as soon as she answered. "It's time to live for myself." 2 months passed since Victoria's visit to the bookstore. Life continued its course, though nothing was as before. I had no direct news from Jessica, only what Emily occasionally told me. According to her, my daughter and Brandon had postponed the move to London due to some visa issues, but the idea was still on the table. One Saturday afternoon, while organizing new books that had arrived, Maria came running into the bookstore, more agitated than I had ever seen her. "Dorothy, you won't believe it. Pages and Print, that bookstore in the mall, is closing. The owner is retiring and wants to sell everything." The news caught me by surprise. Pages and Print was one of the largest bookstores in the city, located in a prime spot in the mall. I had always envied its location and diverse clientele. "That's a shame," I commented, genuinely sad. "It was a great bookstore." "No, you don't understand," Maria exclaimed, shaking my shoulders. "This is your chance. You've always dreamed of having a bigger, more central bookstore. You could buy their location." I laughed at the absurd idea. "With what money, Maria? You know very well I can barely pay the bills here." She wasn't discouraged. "I've already thought about that. Remember Carlos, my brother? He's looking for a safe investment for his retirement money. If you come in as a partner with your experience and him with the capital." I started to protest, but Maria didn't let me finish. She had already spoken with her brother, who was interested in the idea. 2 days later, the three of us were meeting with the owner of Pages in Print, discussing values and conditions. The process was faster than I imagined. In less than a month, I was co-owner of one of the city's most traditional bookstores. The small neighborhood bookstore where I worked for 15 years was sold, and the money used to renovate and modernize Pages in Print, which would now be called Turning Pages. Emily was one of the first people I called with the news. She was genuinely happy for me and offered to help with decorating the space. "I'll bring the kids to the opening," she promised. "Noah and Emma are already excited to see Grandma Dorothy's bookstore." I smiled, hearing that. In recent months, I had grown closer to the children, taking them out on weekends and telling them stories. It was a relationship that filled some of the void left by Jessica. The opening of Turning Pages was a bigger event than I could have imagined. Carlos, my new partner, had contacts in the local press, and we got a story in the city journal. Maria organized a cocktail party, and we invited local writers for an autograph session. On the opening night, as I observed the packed bookstore, I felt an emotion I hadn't experienced in a long time. Pride, not just of the bookstore itself, but of myself, for having found the courage to start over at 68 years old. Emily arrived early with the children, and Michael appeared soon after, bringing flowers. "For the city's newest successful businesswoman," he said, handing me a bouquet of lilies. The night was going perfectly when I noticed movement at the bookstore entrance. My heart stopped when I recognized Jessica and Brandon entering timidly, looking around as if unsure whether they would be welcome. Emily, who was beside me, followed my gaze and immediately tensed. "Do you want me to ask them to leave?" she asked quietly. "No," I replied, surprising even myself. "They can stay." Jessica looked different, thinner, with visible dark circles even under careful makeup. She hesitated when she saw me, but Brandon encouraged her to approach. "Mom," she began, her voice almost a whisper, "we heard about the opening from the newspaper. I hope you don't mind that we came." "The bookstore is open to the public," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "You're welcome, like any customer." Jessica seemed to wilt at my formal response, but what did she expect? That I would receive her with open arms after everything that had happened. "It's very beautiful," she commented, looking around. "You always had good taste in books." "Thank you," I replied, still maintaining emotional distance. "If you'll excuse me, I have other guests to attend to." I walked away, feeling Jessica's gaze follow me. Part of me wanted to go back, hug her, and say everything would be okay. But another part, stronger and wiser, Knew I couldn't give in so easily. Not this time. Later, when most guests had already left, Jessica approached again. She was alone. Brandon was talking with Michael on the other side of the bookstore. "Can we talk?" she asked, with a hesitation that wasn't characteristic of the new Jessica I had known in recent years. I indicated the armchairs in the reading corner, now empty. We sat facing each other, with the weight of months of silence between us. "Brandon and I aren't going to London anymore," she began, nervously playing with the edge of her purse. He turned down the offer. "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. Jessica took a deep breath before answering. "Because I asked him to. After what happened at my birthday, a lot changed. Brandon and I had several serious discussions. He told me things I needed to hear." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "He made me see how I had become someone else. Someone he didn't recognize. He said the Jessica he fell in love with was kind, authentic, valued people for who they were, not what they had or represented." "And what did you say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, though my heart was racing. "That he was right," she admitted, finally raising her eyes to meet mine. "I lost my way, Mom. I let myself be dazzled by Victoria's world, by social acceptance, by status, and in the process, I lost what really mattered. Like your mother." I couldn't avoid the bitterness in my voice. Jessica flinched, as if my words had physically hit her. "Yes," she whispered. "Like you." A heavy silence settled between us. Through the bookstore window, I could see the mall lights reflecting in the parking lot puddles. It was a beautiful night, despite everything. "Victoria and I aren't speaking anymore," Jessica continued, breaking the silence. "After Brandon and I decided to stay, she was furious. She said horrible things about you. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. I saw how she manipulated me, how she used my insecurity, my desire for acceptance to distance me from you. She came to see me," I told her, "at the old bookstore. She asked me to disappear from your life." Jessica's eyes widened, genuinely shocked. "She did what?" "Mom, I swear I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I replied, softening my tone for the first time. "Victoria has her own methods." "I'm so ashamed," Jessica confessed, tears finally falling. "For what I did, what I said, how I treated you. I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me, and I'll understand if you don't want to see me anymore. But I needed to come here and say I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry." I looked at my daughter, because despite everything she was still my daughter, and I saw the girl she once was, the one who ran into my arms when she fell, who made me drawings with hearts, and the phrase "best mom in the world," who slept clinging to my arm on stormy nights. But I also saw the woman who had humiliated me publicly, who had chosen another to take my place, who had hurt me in ways I didn't believe possible. "Jessica," I began, carefully choosing my words. "Forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once. It's a process. You hurt something fundamental between us, and rebuilding that will take time." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand. I just wanted you to know I'm willing to wait, to work to regain your trust if you give me that chance." I thought about everything that had happened in recent months. The pain, yes, but also the growth, the bookstore, the new friends, the relationship with Noah and Emma, the stronger woman I had become. "We can start again," I said finally. "Not from zero, because that's impossible, but from where we are now." The relief on Jessica's face was palpable. She extended her hand to me, hesitant, as if fearing rejection. After a moment of indecision, I took her hand. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a beginning. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "I won't waste this chance." At that moment, as I held my daughter's hand in my new bookstore, surrounded by books that told stories of losses and new beginnings, I felt I was turning a page in my own story. The chapter of pain and humiliation wouldn't be forgotten, but new chapters awaited to be written, and this time I would be not just a character, but also the author of my destiny. A week after the bookstore opening, I was home organizing some old books I intended to take for the used section when the doorbell rang. It was Sunday afternoon, a time I usually reserved for myself. I hesitated before answering, imagining it might be some salesperson. When I opened the door, I froze. Victoria stood on my porch, impeccably dressed, as always, but with something different in her demeanor. Her eyes, normally cold and calculating, seemed restless, almost vulnerable. "May I come in?" she asked, without the usual commanding tone in her voice. My first impulse was to send her away, close the door in her face without thinking twice, but curiosity won. What could have brought Victoria to my door, especially after everything that had happened? "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let her pass. Victoria looked around my modest living room, but this time, there was no disdain in her gaze. Only genuine interest, as if seeing the place for the first time. "Would you like something to drink? Tea? Coffee?" I offered, more out of habit than hospitality. "Coffee would be good. Thank you," she replied, sitting cautiously on the sofa. While I prepared coffee in the kitchen, my mind was churning. What did she want? Had she come to threaten again? To try once more to push me away from Jessica's life? Or was it possible that— "Your home is cozy," Victoria commented when I returned with 2 cups of coffee. "Different from what I imagined." "And what did you imagine?" I asked, sitting in the armchair across from her. Victoria took a sip of coffee before responding. "Something more depressing, I suppose, based on the things I induced Jessica to say about you." The admission caught me off guard. "Why are you here, Victoria?" She sighed, placing the cup on the coffee table. "To apologize," she said finally. "I know it seems insufficient, even ridiculous, after everything I did, but it's the truth." I looked at her skeptically. "Apologize after trying to erase me from my own daughter's life, after publicly humiliating me through her, after coming to me and asking me to disappear?" "Yes," Victoria replied, keeping her gaze fixed on mine. "For all of that, and more." Why now?" I insisted. "What changed?" Victoria hesitated, as if pondering how much she should reveal. "Brandon confronted me," she finally admitted. "He found out about my visit to your bookstore, about how I had been manipulating Jessica against you for years. He said things that made me rethink much of what I did." "What things?" he asked me. "If I knew what real maternal love was," she replied. Her voice suddenly choked. "If I had ever truly loved a child enough to put their happiness above my own." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "The truth, Dorothy, is I've always envied you," Victoria confessed, to my complete surprise. "I envied the bond you had with Jessica, even before she married Brandon. I heard how she talked about you with admiration, even when she criticized your simplicity. There was love there, genuine love that I never had with my son." "But Brandon seems to adore you," I commented, confused. "Brandon respects me, fears me a little even," Victoria corrected, with a sad smile. "But he doesn't adore me. How could he? I was always absent, always delegating his upbringing to nannies while I built my career and social position. When I finally had time for him, he was already a distant teenager who barely knew me." This confession left me speechless. I had always imagined Victoria as the perfect mother, the one who had everything I couldn't offer. I never considered she might have her own failures, her own insecurities. "When Jessica entered our family," she continued, "I saw an opportunity to have what I never had with Brandon, a daughter who would admire me, who would want to be like me, who would love me without reservations. So you pushed me away to have her all to yourself?" I concluded, feeling the old anger resurface. "Yes," Victoria admitted, without trying to justify herself. "I was selfish, cruel, and unforgivable. I only realized how wrong I was when I saw what I did to her, how I transformed her into someone she wasn't. And when Brandon threatened to distance himself from me," she trailed off, tears now running freely down her perfect face, ruining her careful makeup. "He said if I didn't fix what I did, If I didn't try to repair the harm I caused, he and Jessica would cut ties with me permanently. That I would never see my grandchildren when they came. Grandchildren, I repeated, feeling a pang of surprise and pain. Jessica was pregnant, and I didn't even know. Victoria realized her slip. I shouldn't have mentioned that. Jessica probably wanted to tell you personally. I swallowed the knot that formed in my throat. So you're here because Brandon forced you, not because you truly regret it. No, Victoria responded, recovering some of her composure. I'm here because I realized that in my obsession to have what you had, I ended up destroying something precious. I'm here because even if you never forgive me, and I would understand perfectly if you didn't, I needed to say I recognized the harm I caused. We sat in silence for a long moment. Through the window, I could see the garden I had cultivated with such care over the years. The roses that Jessica had helped me plant as a child still bloomed each spring, resilient despite adversity. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you and not remember the pain you caused me. But I know I don't want to spend the rest of my life cultivating resentment. Victoria nodded, understanding. That's more than I deserve. I'm not doing this for you, I clarified. I'm doing it for Jessica, for this grandchild who's on the way, and mainly for myself. I don't want hatred to define who I am or how I live. I understand, Victoria replied, standing to leave. Thank you for listening to me, Dorothy. I know you had no obligation to do so. I walked her to the door. Before leaving, she turned to me one last time. You're an extraordinary woman, you know, much stronger than I'll ever be. After Victoria left, I sat back in the armchair, trying to process everything that had happened. Jessica was pregnant. I was going to be a grandmother, and somehow I had found the strength not to let myself be consumed by resentment, even facing the woman who almost destroyed my relationship with my daughter. The next day, Jessica called me, asking to meet. We chose a coffee shop near the bookstore, neutral ground for both of us. When I saw her entering the place, I noticed the small belly beginning to show under her loose dress. You already know, don't you? She asked, as soon as she sat down. Victoria told you. It was an accident, I replied, trying not to show how much it still hurt. She came to see me yesterday. Jessica seemed surprised. She actually went to your house? I thought she was bluffing when she said she would. Yes, she went. We talked a lot. And? Jessica asked, anxious. And she seemed genuinely sorry, I responded honestly. But that doesn't erase what happened, Jessica. It doesn't change the fact that you allowed her to replace me, that you humiliated me in front of everyone. Jessica lowered her eyes, ashamed. I know. And I'm not asking you to forget or pretend it didn't happen. I'm just asking for a chance to rebuild what we had, even if it's never the same. I looked at my daughter, at the belly where my grandchild was growing, and felt my heart open a little more. How many months? 4, Jessica replied, instinctively placing her hand on her belly. It's a girl. A girl? I repeated, feeling an involuntary smile form on my lips. Have you chosen a name? We were thinking Lily Rose, Jessica responded, hesitant. Like my grandmother, your mother Rose. The name caught me by surprise. My mother Rose had died when Jessica was very young, and I rarely spoke about her. That Jessica remembered and wanted to honor her touched something deep within me. It's a beautiful name, I managed to say, fighting against the tears that threatened to fall. Mom, Jessica extended her hand across the table, touching mine timidly. I know I don't deserve it, but I would love for you to be present in Lily's life. To be the grandmother I know you'll be. Loving, dedicated, patient, all the things you always were with me, even when I didn't deserve it. I squeezed her hand, feeling the connection that, despite everything, had never been completely broken. I will be, I promised, for Lily and for you if you let me. In that coffee shop, between cups of tea and contained tears, we began to rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy or quick, but for the first time in a long time, I felt it was possible. The following months were about rebuilding. My relationship with Jessica, my professional life with the new bookstore, and my own identity as a woman, mother, and soon-to-be grandmother. Turning pages prospered beyond my expectations. What began as a traditional bookstore soon expanded to include a literary cafe, Saturday reading sessions for children, and even a small space for book launches. Carlos, my partner, handled mainly the financial part while I dedicated myself to book selection and customer service. Maria, who had accompanied me in the transition from the old bookstore, now coordinated a team of enthusiastic young salespeople. Among them was Peter, a literature student who had a special talent for recommending books and quickly became my right hand. Jessica began visiting the bookstore frequently. At first, our conversations were cautious, limited to safe subjects like books, pregnancy, weather. We carefully avoided mentioning the past or Victoria, but gradually, like a river finding its natural course, we returned to talking about deeper things. On a particularly quiet afternoon, when Jessica was helping me organize a new shipment of children's books, she suddenly stopped, holding a copy of Where the Wild Things Are, the book I used to read to her every night when she was little. "Do you remember this?" she asked, showing me the book. "Of course," I replied, smiling at the memory. "You wanted it every night, even when you already knew it by heart." "I loved the way you read it," Jessica confessed, flipping through the book fondly. "You did different voices for each character, dramatized the scenes. No one ever read to me like you did." I looked at my daughter, now an adult woman, expecting her own daughter, and felt a wave of love I hadn't experienced in a long time. "I'll save this one to read to Lily," I said, taking the book from her hands. "If you don't mind, of course." "I would love that," Jessica replied, her eyes brimming. "Lily is so lucky to have you as a grandmother." That moment marked a turning point in our relationship. From there, conversations flowed more naturally, and forgiveness, which before seemed an abstract and distant concept, began to take concrete form in my heart. At home, I prepared the guest room to become the granddaughter's room. I painted the walls a soft yellow, assembled a crib I found in an antique store, and personally restored, and filled the shelves with carefully selected children's books. Emily and Michael helped me decorate the room, bringing Noah and Emma to give their opinions on what a baby might like. Emma insisted every girl needed a rag doll and gifted me one she had received when younger. "Grandma, will you read stories to the baby too?" asked Noah, while helping organize books on the shelf. "Of course," I replied, affectionately ruffling his hair. "Just like I read to you and Emma." "But will you still have time for us?" questioned Emma, with a hint of childish concern that moved me. I crouched to her level. "Always. You're my heart grandchildren, remember?" Emma smiled, satisfied with the answer, and returned to playing with the dollhouse I had bought for the room. Watching those children who had entered my life so unexpectedly, I reflected on how the concept of family can be elastic, expanding beyond blood ties. Emily and Michael had become dear friends, almost like the children I never had besides Jessica. Noah and Emma were in many ways as much my grandchildren as Lily would be. One Sunday afternoon, I received an unexpected visit. Brandon appeared alone, explaining Jessica was resting at home. I invited him in, curious about the reason for the visit. "Dorothy," he began, after accepting a cup of tea, "I wanted to personally thank you for giving Jessica a second chance. I know what she did was unforgivable, and I admire your ability to forgive." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "We're still rebuilding day by day. But she's my daughter, and the love I feel for her never really disappeared." Brandon nodded thoughtfully. "You know, for a long time I blamed myself for not realizing what was happening. How my mother was manipulating Jessica, how I allowed that situation to develop. It wasn't your fault," I assured him. "Victoria is persuasive, and Jessica was vulnerable, seeking acceptance, a place to belong. Still, I should have done something sooner," he insisted. "Seeing how she treated you opened my eyes to many things in my own relationship with my mother, things I ignored or pretended not to see." I remained silent, giving him space to continue. "Victoria was never a present mother," Brandon confessed. I think she saw in Jessica the chance to have what she never had with me. And I allowed it because it was easier. I never had to confront her. Never had to deal with my own childhood wounds. And now? I asked, genuinely interested in how he was handling everything. Now I'm starting to establish clear boundaries, he replied. Victoria will always be my mother. Just as you'll always be Jessica's mother. But now I understand that loving someone doesn't mean allowing that person to cause harm to others or themselves. I was impressed by Brandon's maturity and clarity. He had grown before my eyes, from an insecure young man hiding behind his mother's strong personality, to a man taking responsibility for his choices and actions. Lily will be lucky to have you as a father, I commented. And as a grandmother, he added, smiling. Jessica tells me about the books you're setting aside, the room you're preparing. She's so happy to have you back in her life, Dorothy. You can't imagine how much. After Brandon's visit, I felt even more at peace with the path of reconciliation I had chosen. It wasn't just about Jessica and me, or about Lily who was on the way. It was about breaking cycles of hurt and resentment, about choosing love even when it would be easier to choose anger. 2 weeks later, in the middle of the night, I received the call I had been waiting for. Jessica was in labor, and Brandon was taking her to the hospital. I dressed hurriedly and drove there, my heart racing with anxiety and expectation. When I arrived at the hospital, I found Brandon in the waiting room, pale and visibly nervous. She's in the delivery room, he informed me. The doctors said everything is going well, but it might take a few more hours. I sat beside him, offering silent support. Some time later, I noticed a familiar figure entering the waiting room. Victoria looked as anxious as we were, her eyes frantically searching for information. When she saw me, she hesitated, clearly uncertain whether she should approach. After a moment of internal indecision, I stood and gestured, inviting her to join us. Brandon seemed surprised but didn't protest. Any news? Victoria asked, sitting cautiously. Not yet, Brandon replied. But the nurse said everything is progressing normally. The following hours were strange. Victoria and I, sitting side by side, united by shared concern for Jessica, and anxiety over Lily Rose's arrival. We didn't talk much, but there was no hostility in the air, just a silent truce, a mutual recognition that in that moment, our differences were less important than the new life about to arrive. When the nurse finally appeared with news that Lily had been born, and mother and daughter were well, I felt a wave of relief, and joy so intense, I could barely stand. Victoria, beside me, discreetly wiped away tears. The mother is asking to see you both, the nurse said, looking at Brandon and me. You can follow me. Victoria showed no surprise or hurt at not being called. She simply nodded, as if understanding and accepting there was still a long way to go. When I entered the room and saw Jessica holding that small bundle in her arms, hair disheveled and face exhausted, but radiant with happiness, I knew all the suffering, all the tears had been worth it for this moment. Mom, Jessica called, slightly raising the baby toward me. Come meet your granddaughter. I approached with my heart overflowing and took Lily in my arms for the first time. She was perfect, with pink skin and fine dark hair covering her little head. When her tiny fingers closed around my finger, I felt a circle complete. The pain of the past didn't disappear, but was put in perspective before this new beginning. She looks like you as a baby, I commented, looking at Jessica with brimming eyes. The same nose. Jessica smiled, tired but happy. I want her to have your strength, Mom, your ability to love even when it's difficult. She'll have time to develop that, I replied, gently rocking Lily. And she'll have you, Brandon, and me to guide her. I looked at the baby in my arms, so small and vulnerable, but carrying within her the potential of an entire life. In that moment, I made a decision that surprised me with its clarity. Jessica, I said, carefully returning Lily to her. I think your mother-in-law is in the waiting room. Maybe she'd like to meet her granddaughter too. Jessica exchanged a significant look with Brandon, who nodded slightly. Could you call her, please? She asked. When I went out to get Victoria, I found her sitting alone in a corner of the waiting room, hands restless in her lap. Seeing me, she stood immediately, face anxious for news. "Jessica is asking for you," I said simply. "She'd like you to meet Lily." The surprise on Victoria's face gave way to silent gratitude. She followed me through the corridors to the room where Jessica rested with the baby. Upon entering and seeing her granddaughter for the first time, Victoria stopped at the door as if afraid to break the moment's fragility. "Come, Mom," Brandon called, using a gentle tone he rarely directed at her. "Meet your granddaughter." I watched as Victoria approached hesitantly the bed, how her eyes filled with tears, seeing Lily, how her hands trembled slightly when Jessica offered her the baby. In that instant, I saw beyond the manipulative, calculating woman who had tried to push me away from my daughter's life. I saw just a grandmother meeting her granddaughter, as vulnerable and emotional as I had been minutes before. And something softened inside me. It wasn't complete forgiveness. Some wounds would need much more time to heal. But it was a beginning, a recognition of our shared humanity. In the days that followed, we established a routine I never would have imagined possible months earlier. Jessica and Brandon brought Lily for regular visits, alternating between my house and Victoria's. Gradually, we learned to coexist, not as friends, but as two women united by love for this family we shared. 6 months after Lily's birth, I organized a small celebration at the bookstore. The space had been decorated with colorful balloons, and a special table displayed children's books selected especially for the occasion. It was the launch of a new children's section, inspired by Lily and all the children who deserved to grow up surrounded by good stories. To my surprise, among the guests was Victoria. She came alone, bringing a small package wrapped in delicate paper. "For the children's section," she said, handing me the package. "It's a book I used to read to Brandon when he was little." One of the few really good moments we had together. I opened the package and found an old, well-preserved edition of The Little Prince, with beautiful illustrations. On the first page, a dedication to Lily, who taught us all that what is essential is invisible to the eye. "It's a beautiful gift, Victoria," I thanked sincerely. "It will have a special place on the shelf." She nodded, a slight smile on her lips. "Thank you for inviting me. I know you didn't have to." "Lily deserves to have both her grandmothers in her life," I replied simply. "The past is the past. We're writing a new story now." As the party continued, with children running between shelves and adults chatting animatedly, I found a moment to step away and observe the scene from afar. Jessica sat on a colorful beanbag, reading a story to Lily, who drooled happily in her lap. Brandon took photos, capturing every expression of his daughter. Emily and Michael had brought Noah and Emma, who took turns showing their favorite books to the baby. Even Victoria seemed relaxed, talking with Carlos about wines while watching her granddaughter from afar. It was a family. Not perfect, not conventional, but still a family, built on scars but also on forgiveness, on the human capacity to start over, even after the deepest wounds. I thought about how it all began. That terrible night when Jessica expelled me from her birthday party, declaring Victoria was the only mother who mattered to her. How that moment of public humiliation almost destroyed me but also forced me to find strengths I didn't know I possessed. Back then, I saw myself only as Jessica's mother, an identity brutally ripped from me. Now I was so much more. Successful businesswoman, mentor to young readers, friend, confidant, and yes, mother and grandmother. Not despite the pain I had experienced, but partly because of it. Every wound had taught me something. Every tear had made me a little stronger, a little wiser. Jessica saw me observing from afar and smiled, waving for me to approach. I walked toward her, feeling a peace I never imagined I would find again. "Mom," she said, offering me Lily, who stretched her little arms in my direction. "I think she wants Grandma Dorothy to continue the story." I took my granddaughter in my arms, feeling her warm, soft little body against mine. Lily looked at me with those curious eyes that reminded me so much of Jessica as a baby, and smiled a toothless smile that lit up my entire being. Once upon a time, I began, feeling all other voices in the room diminish as children approached to listen. There was a very special girl who discovered a very important secret. That true love never completely disappears, even when it seems lost forever. It just hides, waiting for the right moment to bloom again, stronger and more beautiful than before. As I narrated the improvised story, I saw Jessica discreetly wipe away a tear. Our gazes met, and in that look was an understanding that transcended words. The recognition of how much we had lost and how much we had recovered. The path we traveled hadn't been easy. There were still days when memories of humiliation returned, when distrust resurfaced, when words got stuck in my throat. But now I knew this was also part of the journey. That true forgiveness wasn't a final destination but a daily path of choices and new beginnings. At the end of that day, when everyone had already left and I was closing the bookstore, I found an envelope on the counter. Inside was a card handwritten by Jessica. Mom, thank you for teaching me the most important lesson of all, that it's never too late to recognize our mistakes and rebuild what was broken. That a mother's love, true mother's love, like yours, is strong enough to withstand even the cruelest rejection. Lily is blessed to have you as a grandmother, and I'm eternally grateful to have a second chance to be your daughter. With all my love, Jessica. I held the card to my chest and looked around the empty bookstore, at the shelves full of stories. Stories of loss and redemption, of falling and rising, of darkness and light. My own story was now part of that great narrative fabric of human experience. And like every good story, mine hadn't ended with pain, but with the ever-renewed possibility of starting over.